everyone, and welcome to the currently untitled podcast, where we will be hopefully talking about BTS ARMY, fandom, and research. We are your co-hosts, Dr. Kate Ringland and
Jhertau Her, a university student.
Yay!
Yay!
So we thought we would get started right away with talking about our ARMY stories. Ta-da!
Woo! All you, Kate.
Am I going first?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first.
So
So my ARMY story. I have your kind of classic pandemic ARMY story where sort of classic pandemic ARMY story. I was kind of in a dark place at the beginning of 2020. I was on the job market and was starting to get really freaked out about not being able to find an academic job. And we then all went into lockdown, like while I was on the job market, like flights and stuff actually got canceled for job interviews. And then I had to move my family across the country from Chicago to the West Coast because my postdoc was ending. Anyway, so it was just like this really not great place to be. I was very stressed out. And kind of in the middle of all of that, my cousin, my friend, she told me I should check out TikTok because I had not gotten on the TikTok wagon yet. Right. So I was very hesitant. Yeah. Well, I had heard how addictive it was. And so I was leery about falling down that hole. But she convinced me because she's like, look, you literally research social media for a living. You should figure out what TikTok is. And so we had relocated to Washington. The job market was still super unstable for me. I still didn't really know what was going to be happening and with my life and how I was going to house my family and feed my children and stuff. And so I fell down the black hole that is TikTok. And I think initially the first month or something, I spent, it was like hours a day just watching TikToks. It was really scary.
That's a true experience.
And then it was like the true pandemic experience of like, oh, I'm going to lay down at 10 p.m. after the kids are asleep. I'm just going to get on TikTok for an hour before bed. And then all of a sudden it's like 4 a.m. But it didn't matter. I didn't have anywhere to be the next day because we were in lockdown. So
yeah.
So it was fine. So then the same friend, so I was like, one of my pandemic distraction, if you will, was K-dramas. And my friend, the one that suggested TikTok, was like kind of constantly making fun of me for this K-drama obsession. And because it was literally all I would talk about because nothing else was good to talk about. Like everything else was dark and bad. So then she somehow got me on, she started sending me TikToks of K-drama clips and stuff. And so then I ended up on K-drama TikTok and I spent a lot of time there. And then she sent me, I don't know, it's funny because she's not into any of these things. So I don't know how, like her For You page must be totally screwed up. But then she ended up, this is a very convoluted story, but then she ended up sending me, she was like, I don't think this is K-drama related, but you might be interested. And it was some edit of BTS. And and so it was like a 12-second clip of them dancing. And I was like, this is really interesting. As a former dancer, I am intrigued. So then like the TLDR is I just wanted to know their names.
So it starts
swiftly fell down the rabbit hole. And all of a sudden my TikTok was just all ARMY content. Like it was amazing how quickly it happened.
Wow.
And so this was like early summer-ish, somewhere in there in terms of the timeline. So this was like pre-Dynamite. So it was a very, very weird time to become ARMY. So there was some really good content that had come out, like the carpool karaoke and stuff.
Yeah.
That people were still like playing, like sharing a lot. So that was kind of the content I was seeing. But when Dynamite came out, I had no idea what was going on. I like did not know what a comeback was. I was not hooked in on Twitter yet, because Twitter, like the idea of ARMY Twitter terrified me. I'd heard nothing but like horror stories.
You're so real for that.
And so so it took me a long time. So Dynamite happened, and it was like a whirlwind. I had no idea what was going on, because TikTok is a very terrible place for like trying to get context or actual information.
Yeah.
At least in an army sense. And so I like literally I was like trying to piece together from like just doing Google searches, like what is going on? So then my real first comeback was B. And so that I actually like what was happening, and felt like I was actually like a part of the community, and I knew what was going on, and like knew when the videos were dropping and stuff. And so that I feel like was my first comeback. And then I didn't even join ARMY Twitter until January 2021. And then the rest is history, basically.
Yay! That's so cute. Your first comeback was B.
I know, and I cried. It was like indicative of basically the rest of my ARMY experience, because like I didn't even have the translations. I was just sitting alone in my room. Well, I wasn't alone. My mom was there, but she passed out before it had actually released.
Oh, because it's 2 a.m.
So she was asleep.
Was it 2 a.m.?
It was late, because there was like a
9
big press conference.
Oh,
it was 9 p.m., but there was a big press conference and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was sitting through all that. She passed out. And then I was like listening through the whole album. I just sat in the dark with her snoring next to me and like listened to the whole album front to back. And I was just like in tears, and I hadn't even had the translations or anything yet. And I just, And that is basically, that kind of set me up for like, that's been my ARMY experience of just like really strong emotional reactions to all the content. But here we are. So,
yeah. It's truly music transcends language. Truly, in that moment. Yeah. That was so real for you. Oh my god, that's so cute. Me acting as if I don't know the full story already.
All right. As if you've never heard this before.
Oh my god. Well, the listeners don't know, but I'm like, oh my god. Right. Hee hee ha ha. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Kate, for your Dr. Ringland, for your ARMY story. Ooh. Yeah. Okay, hi, my name's Jhertau Her. Once again, I'll talk about my ARMY story. Also, if my voice is familiar, no, you don't know. Anyway, my ARMY story is very interesting because it's interesting in the context of kind of my fandom career as a whole. Like when I first started fandom to now. Because I used to be in fandom, like really active in like anime fandoms and like YouTuber fandoms before it ever became an ARMY. But then in 2019, I took an extensive break. I called it retirement. It kind of was retirement, kind of not retirement. But like there is a legit thing called fandom retirement where people, they like a lot of times when people have kids or like that, they retire or when they go to college or they start like their bigger career like outside of fandom, they retire from fandom essentially. And I thought that was it for me, right? In 2019, I was like, okay, I'm done with fandom. Bye. And I deleted like all my fan accounts and deactivated everything. But then my cousins, they invited me to BTS's April LA show for Mouth of the Soul tour. And and during that time, I previously had declined because they invited me for the 2019 Persona tour, but I declined because I had an exam the day of, I think. So I didn't go, but for this time, they were like, we're going. You're not saying no. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going. And then out of kind of respect for the fandom and for BTS and kind of to follow my history of fandom as well, I decided to do a really deep dive into BTS and ARMY and learn as much as possible before I went, because I wanted to be respectful, you know? Like you don't want to go into like a fandom space and you're surrounded, like especially a concert, because that's like physical, like you're physically surrounded by all these people, and you don't get it. Like I don't want to be that person there, and I don't get it. You know,
Right.
that type of vibe. And it was supposed to be a very kind of more like me going, and then I wouldn't get attached, because at this point I was still in the mindset of like, oh, I'm retired from fandom, like I'm done, you know. But then it was like all of February I was consuming so much BTS content. All of February 2020, by the way, I was consuming so much like BTS content. This was an on dropped, and it was crazy. It was crazy. And but then that February, I'm pretty sure February, March, in that time, that's when schools started to shut down. And take in mind, I was 16 at this time. I had just turned 16 at this time. My birthday's in February. I just turned 16. I was obsessed with BTS, and then the pandemic started and lockdown started. And I spent like the entire rest of February and all of March just consuming hundreds of hours of BTS content. Like, I think I listened through their whole entire discography like multiple times. And then I like watched so many BTS Run episodes and like so much other content. It was crazy. I think that part of my life was actually kind of insane, because I've never done that for another fandom before. Because usually when I learn about fandoms, okay, this is kind of interesting, but I'm like part of a small subset of people in fandom, like the culture as a whole, who when we enter another fandom, we learn about that fandom as we're entering it. So what I did was I did kind of the same thing I do for other fandoms usually with BTS and ARMY, which is where I just like consume as much content as possible, and then I learn about discourse through like Tumblr, Reddit, or Twitter, any type of like thread thing. And as I was doing that, it was like so overwhelming. And I don't think I joined Twitter until June of 2020, like that June. So I like went through the Jhertau comeback, I'm pretty sure, by myself. And I went through I went through the Jhertau comeback by myself, and it'll stay gold during that time. So I went through both of those by myself, and then I finally joined ARMY Twitter in June, and then I was like full-fledged streaming, voting, everything for all of Dynamite. And that was insane.
Wow.
Like, actually, because I think during that time, I had become friends with people who did funding, right? And it was insane, because Dynamite was the first time where like funding fan bases for ARMY really kind of conceptualized and understood what they were doing. And when that happened, that was crazy. Dynamite crazy. But yeah, essentially that's my fandom story. I've been in fandom for a long time, but ARMY is like my place, my home now. So yeah. Look at us.
Look at us go.
What's the next go?
We should have written an outline.
We should have. We'll just go with the topics list. So, who are we? You know, what is this entitled podcast?
Who are we?
Who are we?
Why are we here?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
I mean,
we lightly touched
that you said you're Dr. Kate Ringland, and then I said I'm a university student. But what is that? How do we know each other?
Yeah. You cold emailed me. That's how
I cold emailed you. Okay,
and then I cried.
For the listeners, for context, I'm a student at we both know that the University of California, Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz. Yep. Go Slugs, you know?
Go Slugs. Woo!
I had previously read one of Kate's papers, just like as an ARMY on Twitter. I think, during like the summer before I came to university. Well, no, this was before the summer. This was way before, like, I think when you first published it, because I followed your Twitter account.
It was published. It was published in the spring of some year. Probably 20. What year is it right now? 2022? That makes sense.
Yeah.
You read it in the spring when you would have been applying to like schools and stuff.
No, by spring, I had already been accepted to schools. So like,
that's right.
So kind of context wise, I was one of those kids that I applied. I don't know if this is not a flex or anything, but I only applied to Ivy League. But I only applied to Ivy League schools and UCs. And I had been rejected from everything except Santa Cruz and UC San Diego. I was on the wait list for UC San Diego. But the way I was ultimately able to decide to go to UC Santa Cruz was because of Kate's work. And I kind of followed Kate for a while, and I knew of her, and I knew she wasn't like the other academics on Army Twitter, because we'll talk about this in the future, but there's the whole drama in like 2021 with the academics on Army Twitter, and it blew up. But I had my own like animosity towards academics, especially coming from a fandom background too, because I have seen academics in other fandoms be pieces of shit. Can we curse on this?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll leave it.
But we can make decisions later about that.
Yeah, we'll make decisions later. But I've seen like academics be pieces of outside of Army as well. And I've seen academics do like really good work. So I wanted to meet Kate, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to UC Santa Cruz and meet Kate. So I came to Santa Cruz, and I emailed you around like middle of fall quarter, because that was about the time where I kind of like worked myself up. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I remember I was sitting in my dorm, like on my bed, and my roommate was next to me. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna email the BTS professor now. Because I kept talking about Kate to my friends, but to them, you're just known as the BTS professor.
That's amazing.
It's actually so amazing. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna email her now. So I was like cold emailing. I was like, hi Kate, you're so cool. And I don't know, maybe for a Patreon episode or something, I'll actually read the email or something. That would be fun. But I loved it, because I knew like you were different from other academics, and there were like other academics I was considering contacting, but I was like, no, because they're just not the vibe. They're not the vibe. And then I contacted Kate, and then Kate contacted back, and they were like, connection. Oh my god, we're armies. It's actually so interesting, because whenever you meet an army in real life, like an army, like they're in it, you know, like you feel it. It's like immediate connection.
It's true.
Yeah. And then we met, and then I came for lunch with you at the lab, Misfit Lab.
Oh, yeah. Yay!
And then I met you and Kevin, and then Kevin told me all the tea about
Oh yeah, that's right. He just unloaded all the gossip.
It was really cool, and it was really fun to meet you and Kevin. And then I just kept showing up for lunch. And then eventually I joined the Misfit Lab as a research assistant in winter quarter. So that's how Kate and I met. That's who we are, essentially. By the way, I'm a second year undergrad. I'm not a graduate student or anything. I'm an undergrad. I'm just obsessed with academia and research and learning about fandom. So that's why I'm crazy. Yeah. Henry Jenkins is like my guy. Like, it's actually crazy. But yeah, we're here, and it's great to know Kate. Yeah. It's great to do this podcast. And I'm just a
Should I give my background?
Yeah, go ahead, Kate. You got this. Go, Kate.
So I'm an assistant professor. This is my math. This is my third year, going into my third year as professor in computational media, which sits inside the School of Engineering at UC Santa Cruz. And so my background is in human-computer interaction, and I study games and play, and I have primarily had a focus on I'm very interested in online communities, but I've in the past have had a focus primarily on disability and neurodivergence. And I approach a lot of my work from the lens of like neurodivergent, positively framed work. And I do a lot of like disability justice type work and stuff. So before Army, before BTS, a lot of my work, so my dissertation and all the research I did kind of up until then was around neurodivergence, but specifically, I was working with a Minecraft community for autistic children called Opcraft. And so I did a lot of work with that community. And it's really fascinating to me to see a lot of the kind of similarities between ARMY as a fandom community and then gaming fandom communities, which is kind of where I have grown out of. I don't have a lot of my own personal experience with fandom communities other than I grew up as a gamer and I felt ostracized and basically ostracized and unsafe in every community I ever participated in. Yeah. So it was like a really big shift for me to go from that space, and going from like the autistic led space was great, but there's just like it actually has a lot of similar vibes where the community gets kind of used a lot by researchers and other folks who are interested in doing more extractive type research. People get burned a lot by outsiders or misconstrued. So there's like a lot of misconceptions about autism and about gaming and so like a lot of my work there was this kind of balance between doing advocacy work and doing work that was going to like be helpful for the community and doing legitimate, interesting stuff for the academic community and doing research. And so that's kind of my expertise and background. So when I kind of stepped into the ARMY community, and after I kind of got my bearings and figured out what was going on a little bit, I started seeing all these similarities, and I started feeling like, hey, maybe this is a place where I can actually lend some of my expertise as somebody who has like a working understanding and some experience with working with marginalized communities, large ones, but still marginalized, and doing community-based work that is first and foremost beneficial to the community rather than harmful. So putting the community first over, say, research outcomes, or putting the community first over my own personal like publication goals or whatever metrics the university has set for me or whatever you want to say, and thinking about the balance between how can I get resources and do science that's going to ultimately help the community, and obviously not totally like undermine myself and my career along the way, but like how can I help leverage my expertise and the resources I have at hand, so like writing grants and doing research that is actually going to be positive and helpful for the community. So that's kind of my motivation, if you will, but kind of that's my expertise kind of coming into this space, is thinking about, I have over a decade of experience working with these kinds of communities and kind of navigating the system, if you will. And then how can I turn around and do good work for ARMY, which has now been a community that has been extremely supportive and helpful for me personally. And so it's become a very personal, like, I want to be able to give back to this community, and I want to be able to, shed positive light, not just on ARMY, but also the good that BTS has done in the world. I want people to be able to actually recognize that. And I'm hoping that through some of my work, I can help create that platform.
Yeah. So you have like a lot of experience in helping these types of communities. And I guess that's what sets you apart from a lot of other academics within the community as well, that you're choosing very much to be conscious as you enter the ARMY space and how you present ARMY in an academic, in the academic field. Do you think that, is there like anything that else you want to say about your experience of academia and how you view academia and how it interacts with ARMY?
I mean, it's really interesting because there's a lot, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot going on in the world right now.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of like politically and culturally and just in general, there's just been like a lot of shifting and moving that's gone on in the world in general. Yeah. And academia has not been immune to that.
Oh, definitely not.
But I see it as kind of an opportunity. So kind of leading up to the pandemic, or even leading up to like 2016, if you want to go back to like also dark times, but like kind of leading up to those times from the disability space, we had been doing a lot of moving and shaking and trying to push academia into a more inclusive, disability positive kind of space. And we had already been doing a lot of fighting in that regard. And I know that other marginalized communities had also been doing that. So it kind of been this culmination of a lot of different marginalized groups kind of converging on academia, but also like the system at large. This is why we're getting a lot of pushback, like publicly, like on these things. But kind of there was already a groundswell, and then the pandemic happened, and a lot of the things that we all had been saying were cracks in the system all of a sudden became like gaping canyons, right? Because all of a sudden it became clear that the systems that we're all living in here not actually built for any marginalized populations. And so a lot of that is kind of leaving us in this weird opening where now, as I'm doing my work, I now have that to point back to be like, hey, look, we need to do better. And like that has kind of become the general consensus, is like us as communities, us as academics, whatever, we all need to be doing better, especially for marginalized groups. And there's still this kind of old guard, if you will, or the group of people, especially in academia, the group of people that were not necessarily as impacted by all this, they are having a harder time letting go of the things that worked for them. And so we're at this really weird point in time, I feel like, in terms of like socially and academically, we're having this really tense, very subtle, but very tense argument about what we should be doing and how we should be moving forward. And what that actually looks like is I've been having a really, really hard time getting papers published. And I've been having a really hard time having frank and open conversations with certain groups of people because it turns into a minefield in terms of the conversation. It means I have to be very careful what room I'm in and who I'm talking to and how I frame, say, the Army work that I've been doing. And so I have like kind of been spending the last couple of years trying to figure out how to navigate all this while also obviously trying to get papers published and other outcomes, if you will, other things that are actually useful for the community, because the whole point of this is to do stuff that's useful for the community. And if I can't get papers published because I've got reviewers giving me really weird, racist, somewhat misogynistic feedback on my work. Ableist, I guess, is also in there a little bit. Yes, sprinkled on top. Yeah, so if I'm getting that like in these reviews on my academic publications where I'm doing, this is legitimate academic work, stuff that I have literally been doing for a decade, if I'm getting those sorts of comments back on reviews and then getting papers rejected, I need to find other outlets for talking about this stuff, which is why we're doing this podcast. Hello and welcome.
Hi. So Kate's a badass.
So we're trying to figure out other ways to actually be able to talk about this work and get it back to the community who I actually was hoping to actually benefit from this stuff anyway. So here we are.
And there's layers to this type of conversation.
There's so many layers.
With how Kate has been doing so much fighting kind of in the academic field, and then Army itself rejecting a lot of academic work happening, which is totally well-deserved, by the way.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess we'll just talk about it now, but with what happened in April 2021. But
that was I'd only been on Twitter. I'd only been on Army Twitter for 3 months at that point?
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I'm a new academic in Army Twitter, and I'm doing community-based work, and I'm trying to do this in a responsible, non-harmful, positive way. And then April 2021 happened
instantly.
I was like, whoa. Yeah, it was,
I remember at the time, I was still in high school during that time. So I was still very much coming from a fan perspective. Sorry to make everyone feel old. I'm sorry. I'm 19, by the way. I am a youngin'. I'm hip and cool with the kids. But
yes. We have diversity here because I'm almost 40. Okay, so we got a spread going on right now.
So slay.
Diversity.
So slay.
Yes.
Look at you go. Hey. Yeah. But Yeah, essentially, I'll just kind of go on and explain for contextually for the podcast
Yeah.
listeners. But during April 2021, there was a girl, I think her name was Emily Wang.
Yeah.
Emily something. And she had, I think around, it was 19 people, right? Emily and her
It was an N of 19. N of
Yeah.
19. Yeah.
And
that's burned in my brain.
Yeah, so there's, if you look up on Army Twitter, you'll find memes of like Emily and her 19 friends or something, where people were just like, oh, look, it's Emily and her 19 friends, whenever people try to say something academic-y or researchy. Essentially what happened was that this girl named Emily, she had her work published in a Wall Street Journal. I believe she presented previously at a conference.
Yeah, so what had happened is she had presented this as like a work in progress poster type thing at a research conference. I think the research conference was, I don't remember what the conference was. There was something to do with marketing. Anyway, it was like, it was not meant to be like real research, basically.
No.
It was just like, this is a student doing a little research project, got to go to some fun conference and talk about BTS. Like that was what it was meant to be. But then that Wall Street Journal list picked it up and interviewed her. And that's where things kind of went off the rails.
Because what happened after that was that all of the larger Army academic accounts came to Emily's aid, and they defended Emily and her, I guess, so-called research. It was research.
Yeah.
It was
like a student project. It was not like it would never get published in a legitimate venue. I don't knock the like project at all. I think it's interesting, and with more actual participants and like some valid, work with the methods, it would have been fine. But the fact that it got picked up by the Wall Street Journal is what the issue is.
Yeah. And then a lot of armies were very upset. A lot of like non-academic army were very upset with the publication of the research into the Wall Street Journal, because it framed, it sort of tried to frame that Big Hit Entertainment was releasing too much merchandise, and it was like harming people or making them spend too much. It was like a FOMO conversation there. And it was weirdly toned and worded, where it tried to talk about basically that Big Hit was releasing too much merchandise, essentially.
That was basically the story. It was like, merch is like, the bane of our existence, and we're all gonna like drown in it. It was not a good article.
It essentially goes into a whole separate conversation about manties, like manager antis, and like people who hate Big Hit Entertainment. The article itself was first picked up by mantis. I remember that. And that's how we, as a fandom, as a whole, became more aware of it, because mantis were saying, oh, Big Hit's releasing too much merchandise, blah, 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 Big Hit is bad, which is their whole shtick. And then we started to see Emily herself. She began to talk about it. And then people started to criticize Emily, and then Army academics, they came to Emily's aid and talked with her. Can we say names? Can we name names?
I don't know. Can we?
I'll name names. I don't know if you would have named names.
I'll let you name names. I will say, like, at the time I was very new. This was my first like big drama. It was great. It was my first big drama on Army Twitter, and it happened to be about academics. And I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from that whole thing was there's actually layers of issues here, because there's the academics and how academics approach the community, how they behave in the community. I think that's one issue. Then there's also an issue of how we talk to journalists and who we talk to in journalism. And I think that the guy that published that Wall Street Journal article already had a bad name in Army. Like, he was already known for publishing hit pieces. And so academics should, on some level, like, be aware of that and not just talk to any rando journalist who offers them an interview. Especially a student should be doing that. I have lots of like advisorly feelings about how all this went down, but so there's like two separate issues. And the thing is that they got conflated on Twitter, of course, because drama. And so you got a lot of people angry about the article and the way things were construed. But then there's also all the like, people trying to justify the project and its methods, when in reality, it was a student project that should never have gotten as far as being seen as legitimate in like an outsider perspective. It was truly like what we would call in academia, like a poster presentation that a student would do that everybody in the academic community understands to be a work in progress, not actually publishable. And so that messaging did not get conveyed at all during the fallout of all of this.
Yeah, from my understanding at that time, because I was only Army at that time, it was a lot of people viewed it as the academics trying to legitimize the research instead of trying to criticize, because people were talking about the snowballing method, where her sampling was snowballed. So she asked one person and then someone would recommend someone else, which is how do you feel about the snowballing method, Kate?
I think it's totally legitimate depending on the methods you're using. So like if I'm doing interviews, I will totally ask, do you have friends that you think would be good, or do you have other names that I should reach out to? Like I totally use that all the time. But then we talk about that. We talk about what that means for what the data looks like. And you try to get, like, depending on the kind of studying what you're doing, but you do want to try to get a diverse set of people. But the thing with Army, I will say, and I've been very careful about how I write this, especially in my publications and stuff, and when I'm talking about this online, is we are huge. Like, we are so big. Like, I cannot express how large we are, because I cannot conceive of how large we are. It's just like, it's one of those things. We are huge. And so anytime I'm talking about Army, I am talking about my Army community, which still thousands of people, but like, and I'm very like, I'll say this in my papers, like English speaking, and then I talk about my own characteristics of being a disabled queer white woman, blah, 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 and like, and middle-aged and all these things that the algorithm kind of sticks my Army community together for me. And then that is more representative of what I'm talking about. Like, obviously, I'm not speaking about the K Army experience, or I'm not speaking about, Army from India or anywhere else. Like, I'm speaking about my online experience, which is going to be shaped very much by the algorithm and shaped very much by the people who speak the same language as me, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be very careful about how you talk about it. And then if a journalist picks it up, you kind of lose your ability, because journalists kind of run with whatever they want, and they do not come back and ask you if, there's they don't come back and ask, does this what you meant? No, that never happens. So you have to be really careful about how you say things to them, because then you have some, a-hole from the Wall Street Journal who's just like, look at all the Army, when in reality it was 19 Army out of the millions of us, right? And so you have to be really careful about how you talk about what you're actually saying and who you're actually representing with what you say.
Yeah, and that sort of leads into this larger conversation of how armies just don't interact with journalists and academics.
Yeah,
and how a lot of armies don't get interviewed, actually, or if we're ever quoted. Like, I know we're quoted by like Korea Boo or All K-pop, and
we don't. That's not real journalism.
They're not. It's not real journalism. But
I know all that blocked.
Yeah, same. But even though I have them blocked, Korea Boo still steals my posts and they put them in articles. It's annoying. It's so annoying. It's actually, it's like, I don't consent to you looking at my posts, but you violate that consent and you're still looking at my account.
Yeah.
So
that's nice.
You have a problem.
That's great.
But essentially, when we're talking about this too, there's like the whole point of armies. We don't interact with journalists and academics a lot because we don't want to be misconstrued and we don't want to be misrepresented. And I think Kate and I, and just like with the research and everything, we've done kind of a good job at trying to include the fandom. And like, I know you tweet a lot of things just to like, get like a feel of what people feel about certain things. You tweet things out and people just give their opinions.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like, even when I was giving that talk in June, I gave a talk in Washington, DC. It was like meant to be TED Talk like, and like literally the first thing I got the email, like, you've been accepted this program, now you have to give a talk. The first thing I did was like, oh my God, what am I going to give a talk on? And then I went to Twitter and I'm like, oh my God, what would you all like to know, people outside of Army, to know about Army? I got some, like, gosh, those replies, they made me cry. With some really nice stuff. Army is so sweet.
It's so wonderful how the first thought you have is like, I need to ask my community before you write.
Well, yeah, I don't want to be like, I don't want to be the person that's like, I don't like being the only opinion. I guess is like, I don't know. It makes me really uncomfortable to like be I guess what some people might dub like the authority on something. I really hate that word. Like that makes me really uncomfortable because I do community-based work and I actually care about what my community thinks about things. And I want to be able to convey those thoughts and feelings to outsiders and everyone else, and even back to the community. And I think that, it makes me really uncomfortable to think like I could just go out there and say something out of pocket and get it wrong. I don't know. It's terrifying to me, like on multiple levels, but not just because like, oh, I'm going to get canceled or whatever. Not that. It's more like I would feel personally bad if I got something wrong.
Yeah, like you misrepresent the community or you frame the community in a bad light, any type of way.
Yeah. Like that would actually genuinely make me feel bad. Yeah.
I know kind of like a story to like share with this is like one of my mutuals, this was what during the time when the Jimin airplane thing happened with the yeah, there's basically a solo stan fan base, a Jimin solo stan fan base that made like an airplane rap of Jimin.
Yeah, like literally put him on an airplane.
Yeah, for this really lowly rated airplane line, by the way. It was so hard. K armies were like horrified at it because this is like one of the lowest rated like airplane lines in Korea, I think. I'm pretty sure. And one of my mutuals had talked about that issue, the airplane issue, and also the Jimin, the outfit issue, where they were selling their outfits without it being washed.
Yeah.
That was weird. That was weird.
That was super weird. Yeah.
And my mutual, their tweets gotten used in I'm gonna say names because I can, but in a DK TV video, and they're like supposedly a news channel, English speaking Korean news channel on YouTube. They're not even a news channel. They're just two guys saying things. They just need podcast mics and then headsets, and they need to sit on a couch, and then they're essentially every other dude podcast out there. But my friend's video was taken into that video and then thrown widely out of context, and then in a K Media article and thrown widely out of context. And she felt so bad about that, and it really like killed a lot of her resolve and how she felt in the fandom because her words are so misconstrued, and people were like hating on her a lot because they were like, oh, you said this thing and now armies all hate you because now you made us look bad. And it's things like that happened that really suck. And kind of also, like how that one girl, the train girl recently. Where sorry, to give more context, what we're talking about. The train issue was essentially, there's two separate things happening. There's an army who posts on Twitter a video of her and a bunch of other armies screaming because Yoongi, he revealed his tattoo on live stream. Yeah. And there's a completely separate issue of a train in Korea, like one of the subway lines. It had a gas leak and people were screaming and freaking out because they were scared. And for some reason, it was misconstrued that the army screaming was what freaked everyone out on the train. And then this poor girl, I feel so bad for her. She essentially got dogpiled and flamed and canceled, and people forced her. This is a good thing to do anyway, but she made an apology in English, in Korean, and then she gave context in like a thread. And it was like this whole thing. And I feel so bad for her because first off, it's kind of dumb to post a video of you scream on a subway. You shouldn't scream on a subway, just to preface. But to also add on that, it wasn't her fault that her video got misconstrued and used by like online trolls to make ARMY look bad. It wasn't her fault. And as a community, we need to be stronger and protect each other in those instances, Like, I feel like if anyone tried to misconstrue your words, Kate, I'd be there to just like be like, hey, she didn't mean it like that. And I don't know why this
I will say, as having had my words misconstrued and having people come after me, I appreciate the number of people that were in my DMs and finding me on my other Twitter accounts when that was going on, supporting me. I think I truly would have just bowed out at that point and moved on, or found a different way to operate in the space if I hadn't had those people that we hadn't met yet. But like, I had other people that knew me and were supportive of me regardless of, you know, a mistweet, basically.
Yeah.
So
it really goes to show like how strong our community has to be to get through those kinds of things. Because like really in Army, if you don't have friends, if you don't have mutuals, it's really hard to exist and operate. And
it's super hard. Like I
go
can't
through
even
those
imagine.
things. Yeah. Because I've seen people like the first time they're canceled, they just deactivate and leave, like straight up.
Yeah.
And there's some people like me who's so desensitized to it now that like, oh, if Soda Stan's gonna jump me today, that's life. You know?
Yeah.
And but even being desensitized to it, I don't think is good in a way.
It's probably not.
It's not. My mental health is so bad.
We could probably do an entire episode of this podcast on being canceled.
Yeah. And how that feels and like what you go through. For me now, I'm desensitized. It's like one, I'm not gonna say who, I'm not gonna name names here, but there's this one very large Army account that I very much respect and is revered within the community that said I ate when I had an opinion once. And ever since that happened, I'm like, okay, I ate. I really did ate. Sorry, that's such a wrong use of the term. But
no, but that's like a good point, right? Like that's like the community like building resilience with each other and having that resilience there to be able to withstand like the bullshit, basically.
Essentially. Yeah. That's why so many translators like leave or just close their accounts because they can't well, this is not to be unkind, but a lot of people they just can't take the heat, you know? Like people
I mean like the choice is like, you know, is the value that I'm getting out of a specific activity actually worth the cost? And sometimes the answer is no. Especially when we're talking about things like mental health. Like I'm all for people prioritizing their mental health over providing a free service for a bunch of people who are apparently totally ungrateful half the time.
No, so it's you can say it. You can say it. Yeah. It kind of. Oh my god, I had a point about this. I totally forgot. It's fine. We'll just keep going. And it's kind of add on to that translation conversation too. I really hope that I feel like sometimes a lot of larger Army accounts or translation accounts, they don't have friends, or they have people that support them, but they don't have like friends to support them like mentally and in DMs and in private for those type of things. So I really hope
I hope they have side accounts or private accounts.
Yes. They need
like
that.
I really hope because I have that and I really hope that other people have that too for themselves. Like
the private account the private account network on Army Twitter is crazy.
Yeah.
It's like when you see one person private.
It's like really important to have
it is
that a core group of people that are gonna have your back.
Yeah.
Especially when, you know, especially lately with all those solos and the platform falling apart, but that's a whole nother episode of this podcast, I'm sure.
Literally. And then there's like the whole point of like you need people to have your back, but you also need people to like tell you when you're full of shit.
Yeah. No, for real. Like I'd like people to call me out in private so I can fix something quickly rather than it getting to the point where it's blowing up and becoming a bigger issue. Like I'd certainly like to know something before, you know, it gets to a journalist or whatever, for sure. Like even when I'm sitting here, like, you know, when we're working on publishing papers and stuff, you know, we're all like combing through what we've written and checking for language and checking to make sure everything is framed the right way and checking to make sure that nothing can get completely misconstrued by some rando journalist or whoever might pick up this work that isn't Army, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a whole thing.
We like comb through publications, and as we're doing that, there's also things I have to teach people too, because we have the whole the projects. We have the project. Are we going to talk about the project on here? Well, we have
probably maybe in a future
episode we'll talk about it. But we have like the projects, and I'm working with a bunch of people who are non-armies. Well, one of the people on the project I'm mainly working on is like a former K-pop person, but they're not super into it anymore. But as I'm working with non-armies, there's a lot of things I have to teach them as well. Like, oh, you can't say the Army. Don't ever say the Army in any context. And they're like, what do you mean? Isn't it grammatically correct? And I'm like, no, Not here.
Okay, so
Not here.
funny side story. I have a
Oh, yeah.
whole footnote. I have a whole footnote in my published papers where I have like the first time I mentioned ARMY in my published work, I have a full footnote that explains the correct grammar of how to use ARMY in a sentence.
I love
Because I'm
that.
like, this is not normal. This is not like, you wouldn't consider this academically correct English, right? And so I like have this whole sentence of like, ARMY could be singular or it could be plural and it's used in this way. And I saw this whole footnote there because like the first time I was having a paper published, my brother does all my copy editing because that's one of his jobs is copy editor. And he was like, he had this whole like side eye at me. He's like, what are you doing with this word right here? I'm like, that's just, believe me, that's grammatically how we do this.
Yeah. And when people don't know how to do that, that's how you know they're not ARMY. That's how you know.
Yeah. It's one of those red flags. Red flag. They don't know.
Or they call themselves a BTS fan. Who are you?
Yeah. Red flag.
Red flag right there. Who do you think you are? Like, actually, you're not. There's no such thing as a BTS fan. We're only ARMY. Our only name is ARMY. And also, solo stands get out with all that solo standing or whatever. BTS fans are only ARMY. If you call yourself anything else, you're invalidated. We're basically canceling you immediately. Like, even in real life, like, I always when I talk about liking BTS, I always say like, oh yeah, I'm an ARMY. And people get it automatically. Like people get it. Because I don't say K-pop stan. I don't claim the word K-pop stan. I'm just saying.
Oh, I certainly don't, because I literally don't know anything about K-pop outside of BTS. So
no, that's so real though. I don't think to be an ARMY, I don't think you are required to understand everything about K-pop. That from my understanding.
I certainly don't. So
for me personally, I do really because I'm insane. And
I know things. Yeah, I know the things that I've picked up from people talking about it in ARMY, but I certainly knew nothing about it going in. And the few artists I have decided I like post liking BTS are all like BTS adjacent artists. So like I was just explaining to a student yesterday, I was like talking about making playlists and stuff. And I was like, well, this summer's been really fun because I've been messing around with other kinds of playlists, not for streaming during comebacks, but like just fun playlists. And I've been doing a lot of making playlists that are a lot of the artists I really loved as a younger person. So like we're talking about heavy metal and grunge and alt rock and and the student had never heard of Nine Inch Nails, and I cried inside. And so then I was talking about how I was taking all those artists and mixing them in with BTS songs in my playlist, and especially with all the wonderful solo releases we've been having, I've been able to like pull in all these different genres and mix and match and create all these really cool playlists. And I'm like, that just doesn't need to be K-pop necessarily to do that, right? And I just think that there's something really magical about the fact that I can do that, and it blends seamlessly and it's beautiful, and I can sit there and listen to my I have a whole playlist called Electronic Pain that I built around Lilith, the Lilith comeback. And
Lilith was so good.
It was so good. So yeah, so I just I have a really that's how we got into the whole Nine Inch Nails conversation with a student having never heard of them. But so I think there's something really cool about the fact that it kind of transcends a lot of the typical barriers that especially like journalists and mainstream media and the whole Western music industry have put up all these barriers and this is K-pop over here in this bucket, and then here's the rest of us white people. I don't know.
They try to act like BTS is only K-pop, and if you like BTS, then you're only a K-pop person, which is so not true.
Right. Well, it's like when you get I just to me, I get super because I get super frustrated when I see things like when Seven was making all these lists and stuff, and it's top K-pop music, and I'm like, what about Seven is K-pop except for the singer is Korean? It's literally all in English.
It's an all English song. Produced by
All
people from
English.
America.
Produced by people in America, featuring a like, you know,
An American
Black
artist.
woman rapper. Like I like cannot like. What about this is actually K-pop? And here we are. So anyway, so that's my like. There's my rant for the day.
It's a box. It's like the K-pop label. There's complexity behind the K-pop label. It's like the whole thing with like Suga has talked about it before.
Yeah.
Where basically BTS claim K-pop, but also I think BTS are so far transcended beyond K-pop.
Yeah.
And the label is so orientalist and xenophobic in trying to put not only like BTS and like so many other K-pop idols. I know some people may not like me lumping in other K-pop idols in this conversation, but I truly believe that like the K-pop title is so constricting to what K-pop like as the industry produces for music. And even K-pop, it gets labeled onto people like K-pop artists, like the DPR people, and like a bunch of other artists, like smaller K-pop artists. Because they speak in Korean and they sing in Korean, they get lumped under K-pop, even though they produce something completely outside of the idol industry.
Right.
It's like how in South Korea they don't call K-pop K-pop, they call it idol music, and it's so strange. Well, we know why the Western music industry does this. They purposely do that to put BTS and the rest of K-pop in a box. And if I really hate it, and a lot of people hate that I'm including other K-pop artists because they're like BTS is the only one worthy of it. But I think even breaking,
it could be about BTS initially, but it's systemically harmful to everyone eventually.
Yeah.
Right. It's like because it's creating this two-tiered system. It's literally racist, basically.
It's literally. It's kind of like how New Jeans, they've broken so far into mainstream media now, but they're still seen as like, oh, this little K-pop group that will go away eventually. When really they're like did you see their Lollapalooza set? There were so many people there. It was crazy. It was like full staff.
That's cool. No, I'm so out of the loop.
No, you're so real for that.
This week's been a lot. But the thing is that I'll say is like as somebody who is studying online communities and trying to figure out ways to support the community and ways to think about how we create a more stable, supportive platform for our community. Like this is all related to that. This is all because it had just because we have like say the Western music industry is setting up these kind of this two-tiered system or whatever, and this is how they're portraying the music scene, right? And then we see this trickle-down effect where I go to an academic conference and I try to talk about BTS and I immediately get dismissed because it's like, oh, well, you're just talking about K-pop. Like, why are you here? And it's just like, I have to, it's like, it's so
many barriers.
Yeah.
So many things.
It's just essentially, it's just basically, you know, one industry impacting the rest of how the entire, like, you know, how everyone else is viewing what is going on here. And it's very interesting how I could go on a tangent about this, but I won't. But like, it's just very interesting how quickly people get angry and dismissive kind of in tandem. Like, it's not just like, oh, I don't really care. It doesn't impact my life. It's like, no, I feel very angry about the fact that you brought this up here in my presence. And I don't want you to talk about it. And so I am still trying to navigate that and figure out how to navigate that. But I think that it's interesting. And I think that is why I have this visceral reaction to like when I see something like, you know, certain BTS songs only getting labeled as K-pop on streaming platforms and stuff. Because I know that while that doesn't matter so much to me, I'm still going to listen to it. Whatever. The fact that is going to later on impact my work and impact our community because of that trickle-down effect of everybody is seeing that barrier put in place and everybody is like, okay, it's okay to keep ignoring them because they're just over there in that bucket of music I don't need to listen to or care about or whatever it is. So anyway, it's frustrating.
Yeah. And there's the whole complexity as well with like K-pop is not a genre. Like it's like straight
Right.
up. It's
Right.
not. It's like, why label something as K-pop? There's some people like labeling ballads as K-pop. I'm like,
Right.
there is nothing K-pop idly about this.
Right.
This is, they're singing
Right.
about like the truth untold. Like they're literally singing and like dying and like,
Right.
you're calling it K-pop? It's not K-pop.
Right.
And
yeah. No, that label is just it's
ridiculous.
You know, much like everything else, is kind of like overused to the point of ridiculousness, to the point where it has no meaning. I mean, kind of like, you know, like all the like the Hot 100 and stuff. It's like so ridiculous, it has no meaning.
Yeah.
So
like how so many K-pop like artists are suddenly million sellers, and I wonder why. It's because you have like so many different versions of your album. That is why you are a million seller. Because I remember like contextually, kind of this goes back to like BTS fandom history as well. With when BTS became a million seller, I think it was for like The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1 and Part 2. I'm pretty sure. No, it was part 1. I'm pretty sure it was Part 1. And it became a million seller. It was a big deal because they were like the first non-big 3 group to have a million seller album, I'm pretty sure. Fact check me if I'm wrong. We'll put something on this. I'll come back later and edit this if I was.
Hi, this is future Jhertau. I was incorrect, but to set a good precedent in this podcast, I am coming back to correct my mistake. BTS did not sell 1 million albums until Wings, the 2016 Wings album, which had the title track Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And the issue I was referring to and thinking of in the original podcast was in 2014 when BTS got their first music show win with I Need You, where there was this controversy that BTS were called Sajaji Boys. But basically, they were accused of manipulating album sales during that time, but they didn't. They sold a lot of albums and then won the music show during that time. These are like 2 separate issues that had somehow conflated together, but yes, they are 2 separate issues. Essentially, when I was talking about million seller, it would have been more appropriate for me to give an example of how BTS had taken about 3 years to get their first million selling album, but now it takes so little time to get million seller albums, and I should have focused more on the multiple versions aspect of selling albums and how a lot of companies are using multiple photo card versions as well to sell albums. So that was what I was referring to more than anything in that conversation.
But it was like a big deal getting 1 million albums sold. Like
yeah.
Like not back in the day, but like 10 years ago, if you had 1 million, like the only people getting 1 million albums sold was big 3 groups. And then BTS came in. They were one of the first, if not the first, K-pop group outside of the big 3 to become a million seller. And then now in 2023, people are just becoming million sellers no matter what, just willy-nilly. And I don't think it kind of captures their actual popularity at all, because these people are becoming million sellers and I don't even know who they are, or it's overinflating what their actual popularity is. It's actually really ridiculous, because I know for certain that this group, they're gonna sell 1 million albums, so they're not gonna be able to sell at a stadium. Like that's the whole thing, you know?
Right.
And it's interesting to see, because like to understand how BTS has changed the game so much, where now 1 million is like standard, is like normal. And I know now, I saw this ridiculous tweet the other day, but this one person was like, oh, 3 million for 3 million sales for Layover, like first week. And I was like, are you gonna buy those 3 million albums? Like, is this expectation we're setting to, like, I don't think people understand, like, the album is like what, like $20-something.
It's expensive.
Yeah, times 3 million? Times 3 million.
Right.
What to do?
Yeah.
So much money. That's so I don't doubt that we could reach that type of number. It's just that, like, setting the expectation so high of so many sales, it's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And seeing that trickle down, like we were talking about, like trickling down into like the larger kind of like how it affects K-pop at large as well. It's so interesting.
It's super interesting.
That's all I got.
We went on a journey just now. That was, I don't know how we got here, but it was great. It's a great
we can wrap
journey.
up now. Some final thoughts.
Yeah. Did we hit everything we wanted to talk about?
Yeah, we're researchers. We do cool research.
We're researchers. We do research. We're Army. Army first, researchers second.
Yeah, definitely that. We're by Army. We are Army.
Yes.
We're not
Army.
We're not for Army. Well, we are for Army, but we are also Army ourselves. That's the whole point. Maybe just call this podcast by Army if we want to.
That's a good name. Oh yeah, we were supposed to come up with names. Yeah, that's that's not bad. I don't mind that. I think I envision. Yeah, I mean, obviously we can apparently just sit here and yak for a whole hour and still probably have plenty more to say if we want. I know. I feel like, I feel like that this isn't a bad way to just talk about some of the stuff that's been going on, and like I could envision like future episodes we can talk about specific events, or we can talk about specific things that have been going on. We can talk about, particular research that's happening and things like that. But yeah, and then maybe we can think about like future see if we can bring other people in to talk to.
Yeah, but we there's a lot to it. We just call this podcast by Army. This is just podcast.
I like that.
Just co-opt names. Because we are Army, and it's a podcast by us.
Yeah.
We are Army.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Kate, we're going to be 4 years old next year. We're going to be 4-year-old armies. That's crazy.
Wow, that is crazy. I don't even know how to, I don't even, no, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know. God.
Think about how in 2020, when we first became armies, a 4-year-old army would be a 2016 army. Wow. And now we're going to be 4-year-old armies. That's crazy.
That's too much for my brain. That's too much for my brain.
Yeah. Woo! Look at us go.
Wow.
Maybe go. That's our name. We're Podcast by Army. We figured it out. We're not untitled anymore. We're so powerful. Ooh. I love Podcast by Army. That's cute.
That is cute.
Okay, cool. That's us. Our final thoughts. Well, we have to do final thoughts once again, I guess. Cool.
Final thoughts once again.
The sequel. Final thoughts. I love doing this podcast. It was really fun. I really enjoy talking about these things. This is you, Kate. This is sick. It's nice.
Yeah, this was really cool. And it's making me think that I have a lot more things to say, which is exciting because I was a little bit worried when we started. I'm like, well, I'm going to talk for an hour and then I'll be done. But I don't think that's true. I think I'm just getting started because I think I think this was super fun and I want to come back and do it again.
Yeah, so let's do it. We literally could come back and record a second episode. Okay, but yeah, that's our episode. Thank you so much for listening. And you did the intro. Do you want me to do the outro?
Go for it.
Thank you everyone so much for listening to the Podcast by Army podcast. We're the Podcast by Army podcast. That's so fun.
Excellent.
We're the double podcast. We're double podcast here, guys. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And please remember to keep streaming Layover by V. Make sure your streams in. Stream YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and all those other platforms. Okay, we're watching you. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Have a good day. Bye!
Bye!